Welcome to Holistic Lifestyle under Sibling Scrutiny. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring the role that nature can play in health and wellness. My name is Paige Van Allen. I am a mental health counselor in the capital region of New York.
And my name is Logan Woldridge. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach, owner of the marshforest.com and wellness blog.
And just before we kind of jump into today's topic, a couple of disclaimers. My views, my opinions, statements, all of that jazz, anything that I say today is not indicative or representative of the agency that I work for. I do work as a counselor in a private practice in central New York. So none of the things that I say on here have anything to do with the agency that I am with currently.
And nothing I say should be taken as medical advice. Make sure you get medical clearance before you attempt anything we talk about, as I'm a trainer and coach, not a doctor.
Yeah. So, Logan, I know that this was one of the things that you really wanted to talk about. So I'm going to let you kind of start wherever you'd like to start, and I will jump in as I have whatever things to say or comment on. I don't know where you'd like to start with this. There's a lot to potentially cover.
Absolutely. Well, I think a good place to start is what's most applicable to everybody, which is that, you're going to get dirty if you spend time in nature. You can't stay sparkly clean. You can't have a perfectly germ-free environment. And for some people, that presents a serious concern. Science at this point has shown that a certain level of dirtiness, if you will, is good for your system. It needs the work. So that shouldn't hold anybody back from getting out in nature once in a while. I'm not saying don't clean your house. I'm not saying anything like that. But, it's good to get out where there's dirts and insects and birds and wind and pollen. And as long as you, again, don't have allergies or anything medically saying you shouldn't, it's actually very good for you.
It's the same kind of thing that we talk about with like little kids need to go outside and get dirty. It helps your immune system to build up the like protections and barriers that it needs for you to like not die anytime you come into contact with another living anything. The
Right.
microbiome and things in dirt is really helpful and healthy. And this is just kind of a side note, but it is something that people, I think, especially now after the COVID pandemic in particular, everyone gets really worked up about the bacteria and viruses being spread on all these surfaces and high contact surfaces and stuff like that. We all have bacteria on us. There is healthy and unhealthy bacteria. So bacteria in and of itself isn't a bad thing. There is bad bacteria for sure and unhealthy bacteria. But even so, some of that unhealthy bacteria you need to come in contact with to like build the immune system for your future self to be okay.
Absolutely. And, I don't have the exact studies open in front of me, so I'm not going to say what they are or anything, but I know there have been studies done and a lot on both, indigenous people's gut health, mental health, all manner of systems of your health. And as well as people, as a part of civilization. And often the people in indigenous tribes have a better underlying health systems, if you will, than we do. And yet the things they do would be detrimental to our health. So I think the takeaway in regards to what we're talking about here is specifically if like you have children or something, it can be really good specifically for them to get dirty and such, because there is a lifelong buildup of effect to exposure to pathogens and such. And the more throughout all of life, not just once in a while, you expose yourself to it, the stronger your reaction will be, your health response will be to these things.
And similar, but like a sidestep, maybe if you will, is there's a lot to be said for walking around barefoot. and doing things without shoes on. We live in a world that is very, I mean, civilized for sure, but like very modern. And so there's lots of concrete, there's asphalt, there is, you know, we have tile floors, we have marble flooring, we have hardwood floors, and like hardwood is the next closest to like natural stuff that we can walk on, but even that is processed and stained and polished and blah, blah, blah. Walking around outside without shoes on or socks, like, is incredibly grounding for people. It's one of the things that I encourage people to do when they are experiencing anxiety and depression. Like, just go outside. Yes, you're getting the fresh air. It's definitely a fresh air thing, but also walking in grass or in dirt, or, you know, sitting outside with your feet on the actual ground is something that is very comforting to human beings, like across the board. Obviously, if you have sensory things, right, grass is a problem, then don't do that. But the ground is softer than everything else that we walk on. The ground is what our bodies are used to, evolutionarily speaking. So there is a very grounding and like natural organic reaction of the human body to the like natural ground, dirt and
Absolutely.
sand
And beyond
whatever.
just the feet being on the natural ground, and you can probably add far more to this than myself, but there's something to be said for spending time, even if it's a park, in a spot where all of your senses are engaged in nature, because it provides enrichment in ways that you really don't even think of, such as like your visual stimulus is actually a lot healthier. It actually helps you relax to be bringing in not just like on one single focus point in nature, like a screen, but to also have that in your peripheral vision and everything. It actually improves like mental health and all of this. And then you consider that in all your senses, you know, the wind on your skin, the sound of birds over cars, and all this, and it becomes very good for your mental health too.
Yeah. And I think, at least for me, like on a personal-ish level, is like when you're in the modern world, I guess is the way I'm going to keep talking about this, like the natural versus the modern
World.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like when I'm in my office, I'm looking at a screen or I'm looking at my client, whatever it might be. But there's also like white noise around me, and I have a bunch of stuff hanging on my walls because I'm an obnoxious human and I like to decorate. So like there's that stuff. There's also like, you know, I'm also keeping track of like, I have an Apple Watch, hopefully going to get rid of it soon, but like I have an Apple Watch and my phone, and I get notifications, and I have like sensory input from like 15 different things going on at any given moment. And when you're out,
And can I just slip in there with your things like your watch and your phone? There's also an element of, even when it's not going off, there's a part of your brain that's on alert for if it goes off, even if
yeah,
it's not conscious.
yeah, like a preemptive notification for a notification. um, and so like in an office space or in like in a building, right, there's a bunch of sensory input that isn't necessarily connected to one another. And so you're trying to pay attention to a bunch of separate things all at once, and they can change in a moment's notice, all of those things. When you're like sitting in a garden or sitting in a park, a lot of those things are interconnected. um, you know, the wind then moves the trees, which makes the branches and leaves make noise. The birds are flying around, and then they land on the ground next to you, and you can hear them making noise. Like, so it's easier to kind of make connections between the things that are going on. And I think that's part of the reason that it is a little comforting and a more calm environment, because there, I mean, yes, if you're outside in a thunderstorm or whatever, less predictable kind of thing. But if we're talking about just like walking into a park or a garden or sitting on a bench in one of these places, the sounds, the smells, the feelings, the visuals, they all blend together more gently and more simply than things tend to in our modern world, which is, I think, just easier for our brain to process. When
Well,
things
also from the
together.
evolutionary perspective, right, which is what builds our genetics.
Mhm.
We, you know, civilization is this might sound a little strange, but only 5,000 years old. The human species is potentially up to 100,000, and depending on where you consider the
cutoff.
evolutionary point cutoff being, could be even older, but definitely about 100. So think about that in itself, right? We spent so long in that environment, being adapted to it, getting used to that stimulus and knowing how to react to it. And then in just that short amount of species wise time, we're suddenly thrust into this, and particularly the modern world. I mean, that's only the last specifically 20 years when you consider like all the screens.
Yeah.
And then only what, 120 when you consider the like sound of machinery and vehicles,
industrialization,
all this.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a lot of change in a really, really short amount of time. We aren't adapted, like physiologically speaking, for this environment.
And I want a quick pause because I think we just kind of threw out a lot of words. So, like big, fancy words. So, do you want to explain physiology or physiological? What does that mean?
Physiological is, at least in the context we're talking about it with humans, is how the human body, you know, or really any creature's body operates, and you know, on the and with its anatomy. You know, the anatomy is the structure itself. The physiology is how that structure operates, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So that includes like chemicals, hormones, that includes chemicals, blood,
you know,
that includes
blood,
like,
all that. Yeah.
Nervous system,
You know,
circulatory
nervous system. So the electrical charges, the fluids, the tissues, and how all those work together. That's all physiology.
Yeah. And then I feel like evolutionary is a bit more straightforward, but like, I guess I'll just give a quick, like, evolutionarily, again, in this context, is regarding how the humans have evolved from Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, right? Like how we have come to be as humans now in the present tense from the past tense.
Yes. And not from Neanderthals, but okay.
Shut up. I'm not an anthropologist.
I love anthropology.
Okay, so anyway, I just kind of wanted to like clarify those two things because those are definitely more like academically formal type of things. So kind of circle back to the actual point at hand, right?
Yes. Oh, and genetics, if you're not aware, would you like to explain genetics? Just in case anybody's unclear as to exactly what genetics are.
I mean, I'll try. I don't know if I've ever tried to define genetics. Genetics is
the fun of it.
Yeah, genetics is the biology in your cells that makes you who you are. It's your DNA. Right. It's everything.
It's our understanding of DNA, how it came to be what it is, you know, how it the past DNA of our ancestors connects to ours. Yeah. It's basically every science around DNA, if you will, which is the building blocks of everything. Yep. You know, and not just humans, literally everything.
Yep. Okay, so definitely lots of tangents from the getting dirty is good for you thing, but
oh yes, but that's important to understand the more technical things we were just discussing.
Yeah, especially, and like, you know, this whole episode is going to be like natural world, and so I think those terms will probably all come up again.
And so to bring it back to that, I just want to say to the modern world and how genetics and all this is also to mention, you know, the higher population densities, particularly not just the fact that it's grown around the world, but we've also condensed more into our cities. And on top of that, that doesn't just mean more people, it also means more structures, which means more limited and enclosed environments for us to move in. All of this is not that natural environment that we evolved in.
Yes. And I think that that is a tricky one for a lot of people because we do, like you said, there's a higher population in cities and like urban areas. I live in a city, not like New York City, but I live in a city. And, you know, it takes me, depending on how far into nature I would like to be, it can take me 15 minutes to walk to a park, which is hard to drive to, quite frankly. It makes more sense for me to walk, even though it would be faster technically for me to drive. But it takes me 15 to get to like a park where I can sit on a bench, but I can still hear cars and I still see like a
Absolutely.
highway and all of that stuff. But if I really wanted to like go to a place where I'm not hearing the modern world, half an hour to an hour probably. And so that's not inherently like terrible, and you're not going to like die as a human. Obviously, we all exist
Right.
in those environments, or some of us exist in those environments. But
A lot of us that exist.
right.
You know? I admit that is one of the things that I consider myself particularly privileged to have gotten to where I am, geographically speaking. I don't live in the cities.
Right. And
that took a lot of work, you know. That wasn't, we were both born in the same place.
yes, but I think that it's a very real struggle that people can have. And I also want to just say that people have different levels of valuing being outside,
Definitely.
and like spending time in nature, right? Like I absolutely abhor any bugs being near me at all. Any kind of bug ever is not my thing. It's my least favorite thing about camping. I love camping. I like going on hikes depending on how hard they are. I enjoy being outside, but there are definitely things that I would rather not deal with being outside. And I think that everyone kind of falls on the spectrum. Logan would live outside forever if he could, like hands down.
Hell yeah.
We're not we're not really talking about this in that context of like, what do you enjoy or not enjoy? We're talking about like whether these things should be valued or prioritized for any reason, I guess, is different.
Absolutely. Well, and the fact that there's, don't spend time in nature to mean you have to spend all day every day. Don't even take it to mean you need it every day. For instance, in your situation, there are multiple ways you could program in, if you will, time in nature, such as, you can walk to that park, include the 15 minutes as your walking portion. So you just sit there for 10 afterwards and then walk home. And if you only like a certain amount of nature, doing that, let's say 5 days a week when you get home from work, just to, enjoy, wind down after your crazy day of work or whatever, that's enough. You could also switch that, again, assuming you don't like a lot of time in nature, and say, instead of going out for that short period each day, I'm gonna, once on the weekend, I'll drive to a place and take a easy hike around a lake in a park that outside of the city.
Right.
And that's, both can be more than enough for plenty of people.
Yeah. And I think there are also more, maybe less out of your way ways to do natural things. Like gardening is a huge one, which we're going to talk about actually in the next episode as its own
Absolutely
thing entirely. But having houseplants helps as well. Even if like, you are in like New York City or a big giant city and there's very limited natural spaces, you can do your own like herb garden. It smells like nature, right? I mean, if you're going super, super, super basic, getting a candle that smells like nature,
And there's a lot of good plants that you can garden in your house.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good plants you can garden in your house that, are, first of all, very easy. Succulents we're talking about, which are things you have to water like once a week, once they're established. And they'll help with like air purification and things like that. Pothos plant, which I have here, is a great example of that. So if you want to keep some types of cactuses, can be good for that. Aloe vera, good for that, and many other things. And all of those that daylilies, another great one. And all of these are not hugely pain in the ass to water. You don't have to do it every single day, and make sure like once a week you're good. And you don't have to set up huge obnoxious lights just to make sure they stay alive either. They can handle less light.
Yeah. And I think, like I was saying, even the Like one of the biggest things that you hear around Christmas time is like everyone loves the smell of Christmas trees. And I think like we as humans, again, like evolutionarily, if you will, our sense of smell is the most closely related to our memory. So smells can be really impactful in this kind of stuff. The smell of dirt is a very specific smell. The smell of rain, also a very specific smell. So like if you can build in anything into your home to integrate any of these things, right? The houseplants are a visual, it can be touch depending, it can be a smell if you get flowers like daylilies, whatever.
Absolutely.
It
And
all helps.
also I want to bring it back to the herbs you mentioned before, because those can be smell. Those can be good for the air, and they're once established, pretty easy to water and keep going. They don't require a whole lot, and you can put them in your food. You
Yeah,
can use them to actually season your food and cook with. So you
which
can keep them right there on your kitchen counter.
yeah, which is also like a whole different thing, but is something that we wanted to talk about today is like natural versus processed foods. Then I just want a quick note before I'm sure you want to dive really hard into this, but when we're talking about herbs, you can buy those big giant, the ones that we all see in the grocery stores that are like $6 or $5 or whatever for the dried parsley and rosemary and blah blah blah. But like they're humongous. They are dried. They cost a solid chunk of money, depending on the
Yeah.
brand you're going for.
Seasonings in general too, by the way, not just those big fresh packages. Even if you buy those little shaker seasonings, those can stack up quick.
Yeah, but actual real life herbs have way more flavor and you don't need to use nearly as much of it. So even if you just, like, we are attempting in my house to have like an herb garden. So like we have one that is a more mature one that we can use, and we are trying to have like a baby one that isn't quite ready to use yet. And we just kind of keep going through those because we don't have
Yeah.
a yard to garden in, like fully garden in. So we have like a cycle type of system to keep ourselves with parsley and thyme, which we use a bunch of, and we don't
Yes.
need to use nearly as much as the like dry shaker things. So you don't need to have
Yeah.
like an entire bush of any of these herbs.
And again, they're really hardy too, in the sense of you could over harvest quite a bit actually, and they'll still come back. You don't have to worry about, oh, I can only take this many leaves. There's plenty for any kind of seasoning you want to do.
Yeah.
I have a sage plant. I just cut it like half of it off, and it's already starting to show new growth. They can take a beating.
And so other than herbs though, obviously we have a lot of processed foods these days.
Yes. And before we really get into saying good, bad, any of that, I want to make it very clear that not all processed foods are bad, right? There's, just like we've said here with plants and amount of nature and all that, there's a big range to consider here. For example, if you get a frozen meal that's, you know, one of the healthier frozen meals and you cook that, that's okay. I would say that's not that much worse than natural if you read the ingredients and, they haven't already done all kinds of things in a manufacturing plant to the foods. On the other hand, you have things like chips that are pretty much completely processed. We call it ultra processed foods. Those are really just not good for you. Like
Okay,
there's
so
pretty much, unless you're starving to death, no benefits to something like that. But they're both under this more general label of processed foods. So there is
what
a
does
range.
processed mean?
Processed just means that it has been put through a process to turn it into what you're eating from what it was when it came from whatever in nature it comes from, the ingredients you read on the list.
Right. So let's
So
go with
that
like
can
the
include
chips.
things
Yeah.
that, like the chips. So this can include things like with chips, the ingredients you'll read, and some of those ingredients are things like chemicals. Like they don't even have names. Some of them.
Hang on, I have
You have
those right
some
next to
chips.
me because I'm so
You have
healthy.
some chips, right?
No, they're
Oh,
Lay's
they're
sour cream
Lay's.
cheddar.
I'm sorry.
Yep. There's
I was
citric
making out to be healthy
acid,
everywhere. My bad.
lactic acid, whey protein isolate. I don't know what that is.
Which
Milk.
that is actually what protein powder is.
Oh, look at that. milk. See, I'm having protein. Um, Maltodextrin. That's made from corn in parentheses.
See, it's made from corn though, right there, perfect example. So they took corn, they put it through some form of machinery, chemical processing, and then they
Mining.
got this either isolated or more concentrated or a mixture of the two thing out of it. That's now processed. Actually, at that point, I would say that's ultra processed. Process though can also be like, we took corn, we ground it up, and now you have cornstarch, the natural type, where it's ground up and now you can do stuff with it. That's still technically processed.
Right, like
It's
masa.
not in the state. Right. So again, there's a huge range to what processed is, and it's more of those ultra processed, like a lot of those ingredients you just read, that we would say it's almost explicitly bad. Now there are certain things you get from it, many of them mostly situational. Like you're really stressed out, it can give a huge boost, though it is often temporary.
That's what we're here for.
And then there's other things like, if you're legitimately starving, though, honestly, particularly in America here, very few people are truly starving. And what I mean by truly starving isn't just like, oh, I'm hungry, I haven't eaten in half a day. That's still hungry. You still probably should get some food. But when I say starving, I mean like it's starting to hurt, your stomach lining's getting eaten away, like you're starving to death. In a situation where like I need something because to be even more clear and maybe less extreme, there's health detriments to the level of hunger that I have reached.
Yeah.
Now it's if all you have around are ultra processed foods, go for the ultra processed foods. You need something to eat. Your body does require food to live like any other creature. And we get that through two things: the things we drink, the things we eat. You don't get them through sunlight like a plant. It can make you feel like you did because it gives you things like vitamin D that your body transforms into these that then are able to utilize the energy that you have given yourself through food and drink better. But that doesn't mean it's giving you that like actual, in essence, energy. It's just making it more available to you. So you have to still eat.
Yep. And there is a lot of stuff to consider with like regards to nutrition. So we're not going to dive into the nitty gritty stuff of nutrition itself. I'm sure that'll be discussed a lot more later on, but we don't have that amount of time left today. So we're not going to get into like all the nutrition things.
Right. But I would like to say this. When it comes to the nutrition you will get in general from processed versus natural foods, generally the natural foods will give you more nutrition for two reasons. One, they just have a wider spectrum of nutrition to them. In the journey of our creating this huge processed foods industry that we have today, there have been plenty of improvements we've had to make to things when we've realized, oh, we didn't build that in to the food we're feeding our citizens. And so now it's causing all these health problems because our natural food supply had it. We didn't even know it. So we didn't add it. A big one is the one you may have heard of, though many people, I'm not sure, know where it comes from: scurvy, right? This is a really early form of what I'm talking about here. Sailors would get scurvy because they didn't know they needed to bring fruits on board with them to provide the vitamin C and such. So it made them sick. Then they realized they needed to give it. Now almost nobody gets scurvy anymore because generally we boost vitamin C and everything because we know you get seriously ill if you don't get enough.
Yeah.
So generally for things like that, natural foods are better. However, the processed foods, remember, our digestive system, really what it's doing is breaking down all these foods. The process of our bodies processing these nutrients has its own benefits, such as strengthening our body's ability to do that. So that has benefit as well. However, for that same reason, there are times such as when, again, you're really craving nutrition right now. I'm actually starving. Processed foods can be better. It's easier for your body to start feeding off of that nutrition. It doesn't need the time to break it down and such. So situation can be important.
Okay. And I think again, I guess my takeaway from this conversation, because again, this is much more in your wheelhouse, I think, than in mine, the nutrition and food situation, is processed foods are not inherently like bad,
Yeah,
innately
they're not
bad for
evil.
you. Right.
Taboo of all process. Yeah, no.
Right. There's a time and place, and context matters, and moderation matters. And I think especially when we talk about like any health related things, moderation matters. I mean, you can have too much of a good thing, very literally. Logan, I
Hmm.
know, and I'm just going to offer this because I'm sure you'll talk about it at some point. Logan has hurt himself many a time from working out way too much and then screws himself over because he gets injured and can't work out then for like a week or two. And like,
I've hurt myself bad enough to have to take a month plus off before. Yeah.
right, and like, and that is what we like. Yes, moderation in like food intake and like what you're eating and blah blah blah, but like in any capacity, really. Even moderation like exists in therapy. That's part of the thing that we as therapists are trained to like pay attention to and notice when we're inundating someone with too much information about a thing that they've been through, or like we're pushing too far and someone's not ready to go that far yet. Like,
Or, and I think this is key in all of our all these health professions, is we're also here to help you to notice when you're just taking, maybe I gave you the right amount of information, and some of us, again, myself being this type, will take that information and we'll use it. It's not that we don't use it, we overuse it.
mhm.
I'm going to apply this to absolutely everything I possibly can and do it every single day, all the time that it's able to be done.
Yep.
That's not always the right approach.
Right. And that can be either because you're stressed out about the thing. So you're trying, like, you're overcompensating because you're like, oh my God, I've been doing that so badly and blah, blah, blah. And now I need to do the exact opposite. That's also not great. It can be because you're excited about the new information and you want to just like make use of it and see what happens and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter what the reason is, really. Moderation in any capacity for anything is really, really important.
Absolutely. And again, because we're talking about nature, I would like to put in here, so this is how I always make sense of things like this. There is an evolutionary point to this, right? In nature, we can get almost nothing at 100% consistency.
Yeah.
So we are not built to have total consistency. And by we, I mean generally health practitioners, whatever field, talk a lot about consistency being important in this and that. But there has to be some level of variability within the consistency.
Mm.
And the reason I think a lot of us talk so much about consistency, in spite of what we're saying here, is that most of us are actually too low on it. But that doesn't mean there isn't a too high on your consistency scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then
That's
you're
all we're
getting
saying.
into like rigidity, and that's a different kind
Right.
of issue.
I myself, because I was researching something for a post recently, realized I needed to increase my own variability when it comes to my sleep wake time. I've always been a dead on. It's got to be at this exact time. You have about a hour of variability that should be in your sleep wake time. That's okay. Shouldn't say should be, if you don't naturally, but that's okay to be in your sleep wake time and without any kind of, so things like that.
Just throwing that. Um, so I'm trying to think. Was there any other big something you wanted to kind of talk about?
Yes, I think we should discuss in the same way we have all these other topics, particularly the synergistic benefits of exercise and nature, or rather, exercise in these natural environments we've talked about. Now I understand this won't be applicable for everybody, but even if we're just talking about, a walk through nature, there are certain benefits to that over a treadmill. Not that a treadmill doesn't also give its own benefits,
Right.
but
Let's be
there
clear.
are things.
We're in the Northeast. We get snow. We know that walking in a blizzard not going to happen. Like there, there are natural world limits as well as modern world limits to these things.
Absolutely. Although, if you like walking in snowstorms with the proper preparation, it is doable.
Go for it. Sure, if you want.
um, and in fact, benefits of that specifically are being researched right now. But anyways,
Okay then.
Um, there are benefits to these two things being brought together, but as I just stated about particularly snowstorms, or in the more proper term that should be used here is extreme cold weather, be exercising in extreme colds. A lot of this specific combination of like what happens when these two things happen together are very much being looked into right now. So there's very little concrete. A lot of it is just like our best guess right now.
Well, and I'm curious because to me, like the one of the first things that comes to mind, you said extreme cold weather, and like I'm thinking of like the opposite. Hot yoga is such a thing right now. Maybe not right now, maybe it's a few years ago, but hot yoga is still very much a thing where they crank the heat up. It's like a
Yep.
sauna while you're doing yoga, which to me sounds like a goddamn nightmare. Um, but people swear by it.
Yep. And they even make like sweatsuits you can wear while jogging because some people, yeah. Because when you raise your temperature, there is a underlying scientific reason for the term you're burning calories. There is an actual rise in the temperature and you are technically burning energy. But by burning energy, it's like how a car burns fuel. Like you're utilizing what the reason it's burning off is because you're using it in the way that you're using it, so it burns off.
Mm-hmm.
And just like an engine in a vehicle, your body heats up as it does more of this, as you demand more of it and all of this. So the idea with all of these kind of hotter environment things is to assist that and thereby make it burn more and such. Now, at the same time, there are advantages in environment like that, such as you're exuding more toxins through your sweat, things like this. At the same time, it means you need to hydrate more. But yes, these are the benefits of that. And in colder environments, they're starting to find that it boosts our immune system to work out in cold environments. There's some interesting, again, I'm not medical in this, which also makes me feel a little bit like I shouldn't go too hard on the science here, but they are currently finding some specialized types of cells and hormones that get released that assist our immune system and come out in very rare situations. One of them that seems to be exerting yourself in cold weather, cold environments.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then also, other than just temperature, there's in almost every natural environment, the proprioceptive enrichment, right? So
Big word. What does that mean?
on top of what Paige was mentioning with the softness of like hardwood floors compared to the natural environment will be softer. There's also more variability. So things like rocks you're stepping on, which also ties into the barefoot idea. There's even more when you go barefoot as opposed to having shoes on. And our feet, in the naturally speaking, if we grew up without all this, would have one of the highest concentrations of these proprioceptive receptors. Proprioceptive receptors and proprioception is the scientific word for how we sense and therefore adjust to balance ourselves. It's how we what's the word, orient ourselves in
like physically in the world. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So with all of this added variability, you're getting a lot of this input through your feet, which is very good for your whole body and done over a prolonged period of time, especially because it improves a whole lot of underlying health metrics, such as balance, joint stability, all this, because your body is naturally getting the input to do these things better instead of just a hard, flat surface like the sole of your shoe.
Yeah.
Or the perfectly flat surface of even a hardwood floor, you know? So there's those benefits as well. And then you have the cardiorespiratory kind of benefits from being in natural environments, the fresh air, and again, all these aromas and stuff that are mixing together. Good luck. As much as you can get all the some benefits from the houseplants and stuff, you're going to be a hell of a hard time finding as much of a mixture as you would get walking through a forest or a park. And then it's also been shown to just by being in a natural environment with all these things combined to be a general mood booster. So,
Being
and again,
outside,
on that, you could probably comment.
yeah, being outside. I mean, exercise is one of those things that, like, I think every therapist would love for everybody to do, myself included. But like, you want people to be exercising. I think that nowadays everyone knows the spiel that like exercise is good for you, it releases dopamine and serotonin and blah blah blah. So now I think we've almost become a little desensitized to that fact. That doesn't mean that it's not a true fact. That just means that almost we don't register that that's like important anymore because we've heard it so much.
Or that it does anything. So what? What does that mean?
Yeah.
You know?
But there's also just this idea, like with the getting fresh air and changing scenery. All of those things are really good for our mental health. We humans, I guess I'll say more generically, like humans, again, it goes back to that consistency thing, I guess. We're not used to being in the same place at the same time all the time doing the same thing. A lot of people go crazy with the 9 to 5 job. That's not what our human systems are built for, evolutionarily speaking, right? We wandered around, we
Right.
built stuff, and then that shit would burn down or like flood or whatever, and we had to restart, so we'd have to move somewhere and do it again and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot to be said for a change of scenery, whether that's going for a walk in a park or just like going outside and walking through some shops downtown. Like, you're still getting fresh air. Yes, you're in a city, but it's still air that isn't stale and stagnant in an office or in your apartment or in your house.
And the things you're seeing are changing and going past you. And
Yeah.
there's a weird effect to be like benefit to be gained from
Yeah.
that, as I understand it.
It's like a healthy amount of brain stimulation is what I kind of just think of it as. Like, nobody's brain likes to be bored. Some brains, neurodivergent brains, struggle with that a little bit more. We get bored a little more easy because we process things differently. But every brain, everywhere, doesn't like to be bored. And so that can be learning things. I think that's what a lot of people think of is learning new skills or learning about new things or whatever. But that can just be shifting your environment a little bit or going somewhere new or trying a new food, like any type of new information for your brain to do something with. And so that's kind of like I guess that would be my little tangent for the mental health end of these things. It's like change of scenery, walking around, even though to me in my brain, and I don't mean basic in a mean way, but I think that walking is the most basic form of exercise that someone can do.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a
I mean,
bad
before
thing.
anything else, like that's what we do, right? We
Right.
get up, we walk.
Mm-hmm.
We grab things and we walk. So pick things up and walk. Like that's you can't get more basic as to what a human does than that.
Right. And so I think even if all you're doing, quote unquote, is walking, go for it. Like that, at a bare minimum, if that's the exercise that you're going to do every day, do it up.
Absolutely. And with all these things as well, you can apply any sport being done in a more natural environment, rather than like a gymnasium or something. Go outside and play on a basketball court outside, or, go find if you have the option, like I would here, I know a lot of people in cities wouldn't, but go and find a field, more in the woods than like at your high school to play football in or something, there are all kinds of things you can do with sports rather than just like, oh, I got to go and do pull-ups on a tree or something.
Yeah.
You don't have to be that boring, if you will, with it.
Yeah. So I think generally, I don't know, what would you say the takeaways are? Moderation in all things.
Moderation in all things generally makes it okay, right? And by okay, we mean health-wise. Like it won't have a too detrimental an effect. Also, that it spending time outside and in natural environments is good for you, even if it's only once in a while. So don't feel like you have to do it all the time, and don't feel restricted to like solely like big forests and parks and things like that. If you can just get out to a more natural than your screen, that's good too.
Mhm. And you can build in natural things into whatever living environment you're in if you choose to
Yes.
do so.
Yep. And that there's just about no area of health that is affected, that isn't affected by being in the natural environment, because we're built for it.
Mhm.
All right. Thanks for joining us for this discussion. Next time we will be exploring gardening. If you would like more content on the health and wellness journey, or if you enjoy nature and the outdoor lifestyle, join us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Get the links in description, and come check out themarshforest.com for a nature-centric community that will support you and provide accountability. If there is a topic you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments below. Hope everyone is making progress on their path today.